Good evening and welcome to the Raytown Board of Aldermen meeting. This is the 1st of March and we've got the MU game starting in about a minute and a half here, so we're going to see how quick we can get this meeting going. It is 7 o'clock, opening session is before us, and at this time I'm going to ask our good friend Pat Wyndham from the First Baptist Church of Raytown to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
Let's pray. God, tonight we just come before you and just want to thank you for your love and for your protection, for your guidance and direction in each of our lives. And I want to thank you for this group of men and women who love the city, who are passionate about providing a safe place to live and great schools and just a community that can be very family-oriented, family-focused. And tonight as they meet, as they plan, and I pray that you would give them wisdom and discernment, that you'd give them a plan and a strategy to move forward in the 21st century, that this would continue to be a great place to live, a great community, and that you would just continue to guide them. Thank you for their efforts. And we just lay them at your feet and just ask for your direction. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pat. Ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Alderman Nelson. Here. Alderman Lightfoot.
Here.
Alderman Azier.
Here.
Alderman Mock.
Here.
Alderman Pardue.
Here.
Alderman Van Buskert.
Here.
Alderman Kramer.
Here.
Alderman Ertz.
Here.
Alderman Hamilton. Here. Alderman White.
Here.
Okay, at this time I'm going to open up to public comments. Andy Whiteman is first, and while Andy's coming up, this is an opportunity for those in the audience to share with this board any questions or comments they may have. It is the custom of the board to not necessarily get into debate on items or to ask questions. They will typically bring it up later on in the meeting. So, Andy, the mic is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Board of Alder people. First off, I'd like to thank our Public Works people for the excellent job they did in clearing up the last storm. In my opinion, that was a really bad one. It was icy. It was really icy because there's 2 accidents on 350 highway. And I even observed a FedEx truck blocking 63rd Street, which I notified our police dispatch of, which they didn't need to take action on because it was in Kansas City. But at least they're aware of it. And the e-tax is coming up. There was a Facebook posting from a realtor. I don't know who this guy is, but he stated that businesses are moving to Raytown because of the e-tax in Kansas City. The e-tax might be used to try to encourage businesses to move here since their workers won't have to pay it. Also, I'd like to mention that the city I'm moving to, I'm having an issue with their water billing. They told me, the water people won't deal with it. They told me I had to take it to the city council. I contacted my councilman. They had a meeting on it. I asked him what happened. He couldn't really explain what transpired. He said, well, read the minutes. Well, the minutes aren't online, so I asked him, they had to prepare me a copy of the minutes. These were detailed minutes stating who said what, and went through the entire dialogue of what was said. And about 2 years ago, this city quit publishing detailed minutes. And I really think it's pretty useless to have something saying a discussion was held about water billing and not say what was said and by whom. Because how does anybody else know what was said? So, these meetings are public record and they really should be documented in writing. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Would anyone else at this time like to address the board on any matter of city business tonight? Once, twice? Okay, we're going to move on. This is a busy week in our city. Last Wednesday, I had the privilege of delivering the State of the City address to a crowd of about 140, I think, plus. It was a good crowd, well-mannered crowd. They didn't throw anything at the mayor, which is always appreciated. But I always get excited about the many good things that are happening within our city, and I think we're going to be telecasting that on the channel 7, over the next couple of weeks. So I look forward to getting that word out to many who were not able to be there and were at home. This coming Friday night is the Raytown Night with the Mavericks, the hockey club out in Independence at the Independence Event Center. That's a chamber event, and it's always well attended, as most chamber events are. And we're looking forward to that. It'll be a big night. And I understand that you're going to be lucky enough to see Vicki Turnbow working this Zamboni as well. So that's worth a ticket in itself. Yesterday afternoon, I had a chance to sit down with the Missouri Department of Economic Development Director David Kerr, along with a number of other mayors from the metropolitan area, and learned about the many different incentives that are coming before the legislature this year that will make us rivals for those many incentives that the state of Kansas offers. And that was exciting to hear, and I look forward to that, and I'd be glad to share copies of that with the board members and staff as well. I'll circulate that. Also understand that this coming Saturday night is Our Lady of the Lord's Las Vegas night. Always a good time to get out and help the local schools. Another big event that is always big, I know in Steve Mock's mind, is Dr. Seuss's birthday. And that is this coming Thursday, and I look forward to being a part of that at the Mid-Continent Public Library, reading to the students there. Tomorrow morning's the Metropolitan Mayor's Prayer Breakfast, so we'll have all the Metropolitan Mayors there at the Convention Center. So a lot of things are happening in our city and around the region, and it's exciting times for all of us. Mahesh, the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Bauer and Board of Aldermen. Considering the last week was a short week due to President Day holiday and winter weather, there is not much significant to report tonight. However, I'm delighted to report to you tonight that I have received messages from residents about the job well done by our Public Works employees in dealing and cleaning the street during the recent winter storm. County tax collection. Although I don't have the number for you tonight, but we have noticed a constant increase in traffic at finance windows since holiday seasons. Looks like Raytown City Hall has become a popular destination for folks who are paying their county taxes, which we welcome as city keeps 1% of the total tax collected at City Hall. The number on county tax collection will be provided to you in the future. Legislative activity. At the conclusion of my report, Legislative Co-Chair will provide you an update on the recent trip to Jefferson City. Just to keep you in the loop, information has been provided to the state legislature on repealing Section 250.236.1 and 393.015.1 RSMO relating to proper notification to shut down water services for delinquent sanitary sewer customers. Current state statute requires City of Raytown to send certified notices to customers with delinquent sewer bills. City of Raytown mailed 9,900 certified letters to 2,984 customers in 2010, which cost the city over $32,000. It is our intent, through the help of a state legislator, to minimize this unnecessary burden and expense to the taxpayers. Study session. As directed by the governing body, the staff has been updating you on the departmental progress. Police Department will provide you quarterly update during next Board of Aldermen meeting. Tonight, Community Development Department will provide you an update. Many believe that major function of the Community Development Department is to deal with code enforcement and animal control related issues. Contrary to that belief, you will hear tonight that community development staff is involved and responsible for numerous responsibilities in addition to the code and animal control related issues. Although I will not steal Beth Lynn's thunder tonight, but contribution of the Community Development Department to the overall operation of this city is enormous. They are involved in planning, development and redevelopment projects, grant writings, community involvement, and community events. They also provide assistance to the various city functions and to the Department of Public Works, Economic Development, Chamber of Commerce, and Administration. Community development staff also serves an important role of liaison to various boards and commissions. With that, I will conclude my report, and you will hear from Community Development Director Beth Lynn shortly after it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh. How about committee reports? Ms. Melson, Finance.
Finance Committee just met, and our next meeting will be March 22nd, but there may be a conflict, so it may be March 29th, and Mr. Wilmoth will let us know.
Ms. White.
Municipal meets next Tuesday, March 8th at 7 o'clock.
My Dr. Seuss buddy, Mr. Mock.
Yes, Council on the Aging will be meeting on Thursday, the 17th at 4:15 here.
Mr. Ager, Legislative.
2 weeks ago, the mayor, Mahesh, our city administrator, Alderman Lightfoot, Ertz, and myself attended the MML Legislative Conference in Jefferson City for a day and a half. During that time, we met with legislators, attended MML briefings about legislation affecting cities. Also attended a dinner where all of the legislators from Raytown, Independence, and Lee Summit gave briefings on the legislation that will confront cities and all of the state. I also stayed for the hearing for the Downsizing Government Committee. That'll be the committee that will hear the bill that Tom McDonald will be presenting for the city that will hopefully nullify the requirement to make Raytown the only city that has to send certified letters like our city administrator mentioned. Just a couple of the things that I want to mention. I know the rest of the board probably has updates from the MML. Want to remind them that if at any time they want to look for ordinances that can affect cities or assistance for knowledge, they can always call the MML staff. We do have a new director. I think he's, my impression anyway, really organized. He's made some changes. I like what I saw there from the MML. These are some of the things that the public might want to be aware of. Restriction on TIFs. These are serious bills. Billboards in cities with state highways, which is Raytown. They're looking at the possibility of requiring us to take down all billboards that are grandfathered, that do not meet our ordinances. We'd have to buy them, take them down. That's being heard in the legislature. It's a serious bill. The fair tax is going to hit all the voters of the state of Missouri, which will abolish income tax and make everyone pay higher sales tax on everything, including services. Open school districts for people who live in districts that are non-accredited. Abolishing teacher tenure. Tort reform for workman's comp. Right to work laws. Construction bidding regulations. This is a main reform that will affect cities that we need to be watching, and it is moving in the legislature. And tax limits on tax credits for low-income housing. We also had a forum with a joint forum with the school district on Friday. Alderman Ertz and myself did attend that, and it was well attended. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. HRC, Mr. Pardue.
Yes, the Human Relations Commission will be meeting on March 17th at 6 p.m.
Any other committee reports? Very good, thank you. Next is the study session. We've got our Community Development Director, Beth Lynn, to provide the quarterly report. Good evening, Ms. Lynn.
Good evening, Mayor Bauer, Board of Aldermen. As Mahesh mentioned, included in your packet is a first quarterly report for the Community Development Department. The PowerPoint presentation tonight is a little bit broader, but I'd be glad to answer questions about the quarterly report at the end and kind of go over the format and get any feedback from the board about that particular document. Tonight I wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about all the services that Community Development Department provides. Oftentimes residents are familiar with the one small piece of neighborhood services that we do, but in addition we have staff members that perform all kinds of services. I thought maybe one way to, as I was putting together my presentation, was to start from when I arrived at Raytown City Hall in January of 2009. Talk a little bit about what the landscape looked like then, the exciting things that we've been working on since then, and what I think it'll look like into the future. I think it's really exciting to be part of such a time when I think the landscape is changing, and it's really, I think it's something you're going to be visually be able to see very quickly. Many of the photos you'll recognize there. On the bottom left is the Walmart building under construction. The bottom right is the Hy-Vee under construction, which was a little further along when I arrived. Obviously, the top right is what is now known as the green space, which is the former home of First Baptist Church, currently under demolition there. The top left photo is 5421 Laurel, which is one of the buildings that was deemed dangerous once we had the tools to be able to do so. So lots of things that looked different than they do now, just a short 2 years later. I thought it might be helpful for the board and the audience members at home to learn a little bit about the services that we provide and who's doing those. If you remember in your budget, there are several programs that are included in community development. We're divided into administration, ordinance enforcement for building services, ordinance enforcement for neighborhood services, and planning. You would think with all those programs we would have more people, but we just multitask, all of us at one time. Obviously at the top you see myself, then we have 2 administrative assistants whose main role is to do customer contact both on the phone and at the counter for the public who comes to ask questions about the services that we provide. Then John Benson, who you often see before you with planning and zoning items as a senior planner. Andy Boyd is the building official. We do have a vacant position that we've currently frozen within the budget for the residential building inspector. Mostly because the residential construction has somewhat come to a halt, although we had a few permits this year. And then we have the Neighborhood Services Division. I'm very excited to say that we are currently, as in the last almost week now, at full staff. That's very exciting for us. Are excited to welcome our newest member, Ray Haydaripur, who's our new supervisor for Neighborhood Services. And then we have a relatively new Neighborhood Services specialist. Talk a little bit about the goals for our department and what we think is important. I think one thing that Mahesh emphasized in his city administrator report, and certainly what I would echo, is the community development department has very similar goals to many of the other departments, and we all work in an integral fashion trying to get those accomplished. We work to promote sustainable development and redevelopment. Obviously, this includes economic development, public works, administration, all of us, and the support of the Board of Aldermen and the Planning and Zoning Commission to make this happen. You've heard me talk a lot about neighborhood preservation and how important that is, that we continue that priority in making sure that our neighborhoods are in the best shape that they can be. One of the things that has been a priority for the administration while Mahesh has been here is looking for identifying and securing outside grant funding sources that gives us an ability to do projects that we might not otherwise be able to do. And finally, partnering with community organizations for events. This is an opportunity for us to build community, get people knowing each other, get them out in the community where they can live, work, play, spend their dollars, all those kinds of good things. As part of the promoting of sustainable development and redevelopment, oftentimes by the time a development comes before the Board of Aldermen, there's been a lot of hours spent by our department in the beginning processes. And it can be challenging as you start to think about how does a development come to be, like, for example, especially the large developments like Raytown Crossing East or Gregory Square. Oftentimes the potential business owners are brought to the city either through our economic development administrator, Tom Cole, or even just a member of the public walking to the front counter and asking, what does it take for me to start a business in Raytown? From that moment, our department is responsible in making sure that they're aware of all the things that they would need to do in order to open that business. We take their idea, meet with them, talk about the particular site that they want to do it in, or if they don't have a site, work with Tom Cole in trying to identify a site within the city. Then start to look at that preliminarily, if necessary, depending on the scale of that development, do preliminary plan reviews. Oftentimes, this means meeting with the developer several times to go over what might work, what might not work, what meets the particular codes for that area. Are there design standards for where they are? For example, are they located along Highway 350 or are they located within the central business district? Oftentimes, those discussions is an education process. If a business owner has not developed in Raytown before, or maybe is new to opening a business, they might not be familiar with things like that are included in the central business design standards or in the Highway 350 design standards, where we talk about building with sustainable materials. We talk about incorporating bicycle and pedestrian elements. That's why when you look at developments like Raytown Crossing East and Gregory Square, they include pedestrian connections. They include areas for bicycling safely. They include architectural elements on the building faces. These are all really exciting opportunities for us to be able to change the face of the retail corridors and the business corridors in our city. I wanted to list there kind of a sampling of new businesses, but these are really mostly the larger ones. You know, included in your quarterly report, it talks about what a use permit inspection. A use permit is what our document is, where a business owner comes to us and wants to open a new business or relocate a new business. So those use permit inspections are our first opportunity to go and inspect their space and make sure that where they want to operate their business is safe and in compliance with all the codes. So just a reminder about what we think is coming to Raytown. I think it's really exciting to be a part of that. The next thing we talked about was preserving our neighborhoods. I thought the two photographs on the left talk a lot about what you can do when you have the right tools. The top left photo is the 8510 Stark property that probably my first day at Raytown, I got calls asking for us if there was a way for us to abate that problem. With the support of the Board of Aldermen instituting the dangerous building ordinance, our department was equipped with the right tools. And what we can do when we have the right tools is actually demolish the structure and hold that property owner responsible for those costs. While we wish that the house, there had been a good house there, in lieu of having a good house, at least vacant ground, we've removed the unsafe structure. Some of the other things that we've done to try and preserve our neighborhoods is expanding the Community Cleanup Day. This is something that was just before the Board of Aldermen at your last meeting. I think this event is a really exciting event as we try to encourage residents to get rid of that unwanted junk, trash, and debris so that we don't have to send them code enforcement letters. We published fairly quickly after I got here some new educational brochures for the residents. Oftentimes, the reason we find residents in violation of the code of ordinances is because they simply don't know that they're in violation, and oftentimes that educational outreach will resolve the problem. We conducted a department-wide training on the legal aspects of code administration. We were fortunate to find a lady who's a prosecuting attorney in the state of Illinois who specializes in code enforcement administration, and she was a wonderful resource. Again, an example of how do we continually train our officers and equip them with the right tools and resources to give them the best ability to do their job. Most recently, we restructured the neighborhood services officers and their areas of responsibility. When we reduced the number of officers to 3 and added the supervisor, we looked for ways for us to best use the resources that we have in the most efficient manner. At this point, we have actually divided the city into 3 zones, and each officer is responsible for property maintenance and animal control in their zone. What this means is during the day, they are very familiar with their particular zone. If they get an animal call, they're already in that area. There's not downtime driving from the northeast corner of the city to the southwest corner of the city. We think this will help in the familiarity of the officer with residents and the situation that's going on in their zone. It also allows the supervisor to help with difficult cases or filling in when needed. I already talked about the dangerous building ordinance, and we have demolished 2 structures to date. In addition, by using the ordinance, we had a property owner actually demolish a structure on his own, so that was exciting. Finally, we, with the help of the Board of Aldermen, instituted the vacant and abandoned property ordinance. We are continuing to receive and pursue registrations for that property and make sure that we're getting the information to hold people responsible for that to the best of our ability. As we look at, as the budget and economic times are facing the city right now, make it challenging for us to do the kinds of projects that are important to the city, especially when we're trying to look at neighborhood preservation and maintenance of infrastructure, and how do we add new infrastructure to serve our residents. We have to find a way to identify those outside sources of funding and be able to try and get our hat in the ring for those. One of the ways we do that is by being involved and being a presence in those metro-wide committees and commissions. Both the senior planner and myself are very involved in Mid-America Regional Council, sit on the Transportation Enhancement Committees. The Public Works Director is on the SDP, or Surface Transportation Program Committee at MARC. We attend the congestion mitigation. So all of these things, while they take time for us to be involved in, then when we are there at the table competing for the grant funding, we're a familiar face. We work together as a team to develop the grants, actually write the grants ourselves. Oftentimes cities secure a grant writer. We have chosen to do that ourselves. And then in most cases, we'll actually administer the grants ourselves. I know Mahesh has an even more comprehensive list of partnerships and grants that we've been working towards, but I think this is a very exciting opportunity for us to be able to do things that maybe we would not otherwise have the revenue to do so. Can you imagine when the next time we would have the funding available to do sidewalks along Blue Ridge Cutoff, 3/4 of the way through the city, and no longer have residents standing in the street while they wait for the bus? The overlay on Woodson as part of the ARIF projects, the design and construction dollars for the Raytown Road and Highway 350 intersection. All those are things that are very exciting and can change the landscape of our community. One of the other duties, especially for myself, in addition to doing the kind of the normal community development duties, is a role in partnering with community organizations for the events. As we look at ways to build community and build the neighborhoods, getting our residents out and talking to each other, getting them out and involved in the community and knowing their businesses and spending their dollars inside of Raytown, appreciating the diversity of themselves and those around them, how do we participate as a member of that? I wanted to highlight some of the events that we do in the course of a year. Obviously, the Martin Luther King celebration, which was held this past January. The photo on the top right is Blue Ridge Presbyterian Church filled to the max, with some spilling out into the area that just simply watched it on TV. The bottom right is the community cleanup day from last year, as you watched residents get rid of that unwanted junk, trash, and debris. And the number of organizations you can see that are partnering together to make those events a success. I think that that's what makes them so successful, is that we have entities that are banding together for a common cause. This year we had a special celebration as we celebrated Community Spirit Weekend and the opening of the 63rd Street Bridge. Yet another thing that was not then that had not been reconstructed when I got here. Finally, the holiday lighting ceremony, which has become quite an event for the downtown area as you watch residents walk in the downtown and become familiar with businesses that are down there. So where would we like to go in the future, and where do we see our department playing a role in making Raytown a wonderful place to live, work, and play? We want to explore additional ways to educate the residents about services. We know that residents get and gather information in different ways. Some people on paper, some people on the internet, some people in other ways. So how do we go about trying to get as much information to the residents in the manner that they want? And what do we think is the best method to do that? Assisting economic development and marketing Raytown to potential business owners. We play a critical role in helping Tom in what he's doing and making sure that we are getting all the business we can, helping people know what space is available, what standards apply to them, helping make the planning process and the process of opening a business, which can be kind of daunting, especially for a small business owner who might just be an individual person. How do we make that less scary? Updating our existing codes to be consistent with best practices for other cities. This goes across the board, not just for nuisance codes or property maintenance codes, but also are there planning and development best practices or changes in our zoning code that can make us more marketable or more in line with our metropolitan comrades. What programs are out there to assist residents in property maintenance? As we look at neighborhood preservation and helping our citizens maintain the ownership and the commitment to their biggest asset, their home, what can we do to provide assistance in that realm? And finally, researching software that will allow streamlined information from residents to city staff. There are programs out there that would allow residents to, as we look at people who some want to call, some want to walk into City Hall, and some would prefer to just get on their computer and enter in a code concern or something like that. We want to be able to have the most adaptable software that would allow us to gather the most information about the duties that we're doing. That really concludes my information tonight. The quarterly report that was included in your packet tonight, we tried to delineate what we had been working on for the first quarter of the fiscal year by the program. So you see information listed for administration, building services, neighborhood services, and planning. Obviously, many of those items interact with each other, so sometimes it's hard to delineate which subcategory it should go under, but be glad to answer questions about our department in general, where we want to go in the future, or the individual quarterly report.
Very good. Questions of Ms. Lynn? Mr. Pardue? No? Mr. Kramer?
Mine is more of a comment. I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you, Beth, since you've been here. You've done a tremendous job in organizing your department. You know, I know in the past there was a lot of criticism about the department, and you've done a fantastic job of bringing it around. I know I've worked with you on some issues, and it's been good to work with you, so thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Very good. Ms. Lynn, thank you for all that you do. It has been, we've certainly seen improvements, and I think you're certainly to be credited for a lot of that, and I appreciate all that you and your staff have done and will continue to do for the city.
Thank you.
Mr. Mock.
Yeah. Now, first off, yes, I'm glad to see it fully staffed now. I do have a few questions here. First off, on some of these applications for the quarter, 63rd Terrace, that is one of them. Was that not in with the 353 tax abatement in the last 4 months?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
63rd Terrace. I don't know the correct address, but it came in with the hot dog restaurant.
It was the amended hot dog restaurant was during the first quarter, but the original hot dog application and Mr. Medlin's property on 63rd Terrace was the previous year.
Okay. And I'm glad to see the Parks Department coming on board for events also. I ran out of things here. You have the registered 22 residential properties and 6 abandoned properties. Have any of those inspections been done?
The amount that are registered
on any residential property?
Have any of the inspections been done?
Don't we do inspections on those registered properties?
Right. Typically, the inspection is done previous to it being registered. These are ones that are just included within this quarter. So that's not your total that we have registered. That's just that was done within this quarter.
Okay. The reason I was asking is about the it used to be an office there on Blue Ridge, cut off a brick house. It caught on fire just a few months ago. It's been boarded up.
To my knowledge, that's not registered.
Quite a while. Is there anything in the process, anything working on that, or is it still under investigation by the fire department? That's what I'm getting at.
I can double check on the fire investigation and get back to you. To my knowledge, that has not been registered yet, and we have had some complications with actual ownership of the property
Okay,
and are continuing to investigate it.
Okay, good. How about Blue Ridge Plaza?
Blue Ridge Plaza has submitted an extension for their, while they are in current negotiations with the tenant.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see some of that plywood start coming down. Yeah, it's been long enough.
Our hope is that within the next 90 days, they'll have a tenant, and then for sure the plywood would come
Conditional
down.
use permits. The old car wash, the building on 350 Highway, anything happening on those?
The
Raytown Car Wash, and it's the old Harding glass building.
Right. The property on the corner at 10,004, we're in the process of reviewing the plans. I think they're waiting for approval from MoDOT in order for them to move forward, because they're on Highway 350 right away, they have to be approved before they can begin construction. The car wash, that property has more complications with the ownership.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Lightfoot.
Question I've got, we hear a lot from constituents about signs, we buy houses signs, things like that. Does the city do a sign sweep periodically, and can people call City Hall and say, my neighborhood's got a new rash of, $169 window signs or whatever it may be?
Yes, signs is a consistent problem that we face all the time. We did do weekly sign sweeps. I will say probably last October when we were down 2 officers, then as we prioritized what we were working on, sign sweeps had to fall by the wayside. Now that we're back up at full staff, we will divide the city again and include sign sweeps. They were doing them on a weekly basis, usually Monday or Tuesday, trying to avoid the typical garage sale signs. Public Works also has been very generous in helping us, as oftentimes you will see people drive down 350 with one person in the back of a pickup truck while the other person drives as they try to put it as high as possible so that we can't take it down. So absolutely, we do, and absolutely residents can call us and tell us that we would request that we sweep that. I think the difficulty is prioritizing that with the number of other calls that we get. But we would like to reinstitute those sign sweeps, you bet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ertz.
Yeah, well, thank you for the job of you and all your staff is doing. I guess, is there any ordinance or tool that we need to be looking at next to help you with code enforcement, speeding up the process? All the things. Spring's going to be here real soon, and the grass will be 3 feet high before we know it. And,
yes, somehow it's going to go from snow to rain, and then we're going to have grass growing like crazy. But what I will say is that since I've started, I have kind of a long-term list of code ordinances in the code that I'd like to see updated. So now that I'm at full staff with a supervisor, I think we are finally at a point where I can dedicate some of my time to be able to do that. So hopefully in the coming months, you will see additional code updates for that.
Mr. Mock, do you have something else? Okay, very good. No other questions or comments? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Azier.
Yeah, I do have a question. Sometimes we reach the point when we issue a ticket or tickets, they don't show up for court, a warrant goes to that form, and then we have to wait until actually stopped. And so if they aren't stopped, a violator who has many tickets and these code violations that don't go corrected could go really on for months and theoretically years if they don't get stopped. What could this board do to present an ordinance or resolution to go the final step? Because we currently do have businesses and residences that are in this state, and it puts us in kind of a really an embarrassing situation, because when we're called and we come to City Hall and make a report, you're very prompt. You're out there and you're on your toes doing your work. We go to court, they don't show up. And in the end, we look like the bad guy because we're not getting the job done. We haven't gone the final step. And I just would like a recommendation from the staff, what we could do to make your job, to finish your job. Because, I'll just say it a third time, there are people who are in a situation that go uncorrected literally for years because they don't get stopped and they're not arrested. And they have warrants out for them.
Certainly, this is something we know exists. One of the frustrations oftentimes we hear from residents is that why can't you do something else? When we issue a summons and someone does not show for court and they issue a warrant, oftentimes you kind of have to walk that line and figure out how important is it? Is it something that we think is a health and safety risk to the public? Before, the police department does have the ability to, if they would know the location of someone, to perhaps go and pick that person up for the warrant. But oftentimes we recognize that the police department is very busy in the things that they do on a normal basis. We have on occasion asked for their assistance in picking up a constant code violator that is in warrant status, but we try to be very careful and not abuse that privilege. I'm not aware of a resolution or an ordinance. I could research that with my surrounding cities to see if there is another step, but to my knowledge, I'm not necessarily aware of one. I don't know if the city attorney has any ideas there, but I could at least research that idea and report back to you.
Okay, I will also make a phone call to the Missouri Municipal League and their staff to see what ordinances may be out there in other cities throughout the country that we might tap into.
Very good. Have I missed anybody else? Mr. Van Buskirk.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have concerns about some of the properties that I know have been turned in months ago, and I still see the boarded up windows on some of these houses and some of the businesses. As an example, there's one on 350 Highway that's probably around 11,000 block maybe, or 1,100 block, I should say, that has that's totally boarded up. The whole front of this thing is boarded up. Sits right on the highway. It's got a big sign tacked right to it that says turnkey property, so we know who that is. What's happening with situations like that? Because that's been that way for a long time.
Part of the difficulty is once we receive a complaint, for example, that property, in my opinion, the best way to go after a property like that is to use the vacant and abandoned property ordinance in order to bring them or force them to come into compliance with that boarded up window. The vacant and abandoned property ordinance is stronger than the 2006 International Property Maintenance Code, which is the other option for boarded windows. The vacant and abandoned property ordinance says that a window on a vacant or abandoned property has to be boarded within 24 hours and replaced within 14 days. Unfortunately, the way the ordinance is written for commercial property, it's not determined or deemed to be vacant or abandoned until after 180 days. So you have to let the 180 days expire first, then deem it that it's in violation of not registering and in violation of the boarding of the windows. The additional concern for, in particular, commercial properties is you need an individual in order to issue a summons for court with an identifier. In instances where they are a shell of a corporation or an LLC on top of that, makes it very challenging for us to research and find a person in order to issue a summons. We are getting better at it, but it is taking us time and resources to learn how to find that individual that's responsible. Oftentimes that LLC or corporation lists a registered agent, but not a person where we can find the right identifier to be able to issue that summons for court. So we are working on it, but certainly the vacant and abandoned property ordinance has been a learning curve for both myself and my staff as we try to make a difference in properties just like that. We hope to get better, and we hope to be able to find those individuals in order to hold them responsible in court. And be able to require them to change that boarding. On a residential property, it's a little easier because the time frame on vacant and abandoned property is shorter. It's only 90 days. But you still have to go through the same process where you allow the time for them to be before they're vacant or abandoned, unless we can find foreclosure paperwork or a trustee's deed that shows that they've actually been abandoned. The difficulty with Jackson County, this is probably more information than you really wanted, but the difficulty with Jackson County is that they are slow in getting their recorded documents posted to the system. So we are just now seeing documents from January that shows that properties have been abandoned, where oftentimes residents say, well, I saw them move out in the middle of the night a week ago. Unfortunately, the delay in the time when that abandonment document gets loaded to the Jackson County website where we can use it for court is anywhere from 60 to 90 days.
No, I don't think that's too much information. In fact, that helps us to understand maybe why there are delays sometimes. And
we are frustrated as well. So I will say,
I just want to make sure that that we are following up on these things, and that's certainly imperative. And I know that there have been a lot of those types of properties within our city, and it's still a problem. And so there's a lot there to deal with. I understand that. I would hope that our neighborhood enforcement officers, as they're out doing their patrols, if they see signage that's illegal, that they would just stop and take those down. And I might suggest, if you have a big long crowbar, that's what I use to get them off of the high places. They come off real well. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mock?
Thank you. I know it's not going to work every time, but I'm pretty sure a simple phone call by a codes officer driving by, seeing a sign up on the pole, driving by a property that's got weeds 2 foot high, has a real estate sign out in front. I've done this. Just call the realtor. Most of the time, he can go ahead and call the individual that owns the property. I've seen it taken care of in 3 days. I've heard you go through quite a bit, but that's just a suggestion. I know it's, just try to, it does work, and I have done it before, and, and everybody's pretty well been in compliance, except for some of the signs.
I agree. I think the difficulty is from a legal perspective, we have to send the letter in order to be able to follow up. So oftentimes there is that opportunity to do both.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Van Busker?
One more comment about the signage, and I realize that it's kind of like the grass growing, because you take those down and the next day a new crop of them springs up, and they do it overnight. So I understand the problem with that, but I think if the people who are putting up the signs that are not legal all over the city, the more of those that are removed and the more often they're removed, I think they'll get discouraged about putting them up, because it does cost them to put those out there. And I think maybe they'll go somewhere else and try putting them up instead of here if they're removed regularly. Thank you.
I feel like I need to wait 10 seconds to see who else has got another question here, but I'm not going to do it. Okay. Beth, thanks again for your presentation and good questions and answers to follow. We're going to move to the legislative session now. We've got the consent agenda. Would anyone like to have any item pulled off the consent agenda at this time?
Motion to approve.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Ertz.
I do have a question on R2372. Therefore, I would like to have it pulled.
Does anyone have any objection to pulling R2372 off of the consent agenda and dealing with it separately? Mr. Willis, I think we need a vote on that, correct? No, we only vote if there's objection. Okay. All right, so I hear no objection. We'll move R237211 to item 1A then at that point. And I believe I'll go ahead and entertain Mr. Kramer's motion to approve the consent agenda. I did not recall who the second was on that. Mr. Hamilton had the second on approving the consent agenda. We are removing 2372. All in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Consent agenda is approved with